Well, hi everybody. Welcome to the Firewall. I'm Bill Whittle. Well, my friends, it's halftime for President Obama, or at least certain people who understand how economies and national security work fervently pray that it's halftime for President Obama. Who can forget that heady day 2 years ago when sea levels stopped their rise, when hope and change finally came to this dismal and unhappy land, and when we went to bed with our very souls healed by the divine presence? I can't actually. I was in a voluntary medically induced coma at the time. However, things have changed somewhat since then, and so I thought it might be worthwhile to look at the president's scoreboard as we go into the locker room and see just how well he's done regarding the sunburst of promises he made half a term ago. President Obama, pushing the fierce moral urgency of now, promised to bring at long last the liberal top 10 list. Number 10, cut income tax for seniors. Number 9, limit the influence of lobbyists. Number 8, put an end to warrantless wiretapping. Number 7, sign the Freedom of Choice Act. Number 6, civilian trials for terrorists. Number 5, close Gitmo. Number 4, an immigration amnesty bill. Number 3, cap and trade legislation. Number 2, repeal the hated Patriot Act. And number 1, roll back the Bush tax cuts. So, how did he do? Number 10, end the income tax for seniors making less than $50,000 a year. Well, the administration probably figures that most of them won't be around to vote in 2012, so hard cheese for them. Fail. Number 9, limiting lobbyists. Quote, if you are a lobbyist entering my administration, you will not be able to work on matters you lobbied on or in the agencies you lobbied during the previous 2 years, Obama said at the signing ceremony of his executive order. And as soon as he signed the executive order, he immediately started signing waivers to allow himself to hire lobbyists to work on policy. That's a fail. 8, candidate Obama promised to end Chimpy McBush-Hitler's shredding of the Constitution in the form of warrantless wiretapping. President Obama has gone to court to uphold it. Fail. Number 7, quote, the first thing I do as president is sign the Freedom of Choice Act. That's the first thing that I do. Now, that's the legislation that, rather generously, I maintain, grants women the right to bear children, and also the right to stop bearing them. Now, since he's been president, Mr. Obama says that it's no longer a legislative priority. That's a fail. 6, civilian trials for terrorists. Now, Obama's Attorney General announced with huge fanfare the civilian trial of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and several others who admitted to murdering 3,000 Americans on September 11th of 2001. The trial to take place just a few blocks from the scene of the crime in Manhattan. Now, that decision was dropped with somewhat less fanfare. When faced with the uproar surrounding this decision, the president said that Eric Holder made and announced the decision without consulting him. I honestly don't know which is more disturbing, that the president could lie in such a blatant manner or that he might in fact be telling the truth, but the whole thing was an epic fail. 5, close Guantanamo Bay within a year of taking office. Well, Guantanamo Bay remains open, at least it was last time I was there. I suspect that after campaigning against Gitmo for 2 years, President Obama got a special briefing and then had a Richard Pryor moment.
I went to penitentiary, and I was up there, and I looked at all the brothers, and it made my heart ache. You know, it's all these beautiful black men in the joint. Damn, warriors should be out there helping the masses. And I felt that way. I was real naive, right? In 6 weeks I was up there, I talked to the brothers, you know, and I talked to them. And thank God we got penitentiaries.
Nope, sorry, Gitmo, high profile, fail. Number 4, immigration. Quote, I can guarantee that we will have in the first year an immigration bill that I strongly support and that I'm promoting, and I want to move that forward as quickly as possible, unquote. Well, it took 2 years, not 1. It wasn't his bill so much as it was Harry Reid's. The DREAM Act is hardly comprehensive immigration reform, and anyway, it just went down without any real noticeable support from the president. Fail. Next. Number 3, quote, we will set a hard cap on all carbon emissions at a level that scientists say is necessary to curb global warming, unquote. You know, President Obama once had huge majorities in both houses and a 78% approval rating. I'm not sure how much sea levels are rising, but those numbers at least have fallen dramatically. Not a chance. Planet-destroying fail. 2, abolish the hated, Nazi, evil, crypto-fascist police state document known as the Patriot Act. President Obama re-extended it pretty much verbatim. Didn't you read about that? Well, the press may have been on vacation that day, so we'll call that a double fail. And finally, the #1 liberal wish list item: eliminate the Bush tax cuts that favor fat cat billionaires at the expense of poor working people. Oh, and the non-single-payer healthcare monstrosity that he spent every dime of political capital on, to the exclusion of everything we just mentioned, has found to be, big surprise here, unconstitutional. But that doesn't mean that doctors aren't already leaving healthcare in droves and insurance companies aren't canceling policies hither and yon. Now, the list of conservative disappointments is smaller, of course. His trousers remain perfectly creased, which is apparently enough for some of us, and for the rest, it's just been a cheap and tawdry list of shortcomings. Like promising the American people 5 days to read any legislation before it was voted on. I actually really got behind that idea, but under the bus it goes. And he's going to need a bigger bus. And then there's the bowing. You know, Americans don't bow to foreign leaders because to bow is to acknowledge the aristocrat's position as our superior. The president can't bow on our behalf. We don't bow to him. So when the President of the United States of America looks for a drop contact lens in Saudi Arabia, or admires the tile work in the Imperial Palace in Japan, or maybe just hands over a 2-for-1 coupon at Burger King, it's demeaning. And there's been a lot of demeaning. First, there was the Nobel Peace Prize that went to the most famous and underperforming person on the world stage instead of to some unknown hero whose life it might have saved. That was demeaning. And the failure of the Olympic bid in Copenhagen, and the failure of the global warming meeting in Copenhagen, and the jumping to conclusions of the whole beer summit thing, and the failure to jump to the obvious conclusion after Fort Hood, and the ever-present teleprompter, and giving the Queen of England an iPod with his speeches on it, and the various mortal insults to our staunch ally Israel, and saying that Indonesia, which does not allow Israelis to set foot in country, has the same shared values as the United States. And by the way, Mr. President, Indonesia's motto, unity in diversity, is not identical to e pluribus unum, out of many, one. It is, in fact, the antithesis of e pluribus unum, which is about abandoning diversity. Oh, and saying that American exceptionalism is the same as British exceptionalism or Greek exceptionalism, which are not even working concepts in the way that American exceptionalism most certainly is, whether you agree with it or not. Now, we conservatives think it would be nice if our president knew enough about America to go to bat for these things, because they matter. And finally, what of independent voters? Well, as a conservative, let me just say this to our moderate independent friends. Have you guys lost weight? You look fantastic. You must be working out. Well, that's the halftime report. Quick exit question for our progressive viewers, though. If Barack Obama is the most noble and intelligent man who ever sat in the Oval Office, and George W. Bush was a knuckle-dragging, drooling fascist idiot, and yet so many of their key policies are exactly the same, how do you square that? Oh, and to keep these messages going, go to declarationentertainment.com, become a citizen producer, and take back your culture. I'm Bill Whittle. We'll see you next time on The Firewall.